dad who, after he dies, turns into a hare. And a hare is like a rabbit, a different species, bigger and wilder, and very often referred to in literature, myths about witchcraft and so on. Now, the Lammas Hireling, as well as being concerned with folklore and legend, is really about othering and what it's like when we have a fear of people who are different, or what it's like to be feared because we are different. I'll write that down for you there. And if we look at the title of the poem, that immediately puts you in mind of othering, because very, very few readers at the time the poem was written in the modern day will know what Lammas is. And actually it's a pre-Christian term for the first harvest. So again, not speaking much Old English or Anglo-Saxon, which is when the word started to die out. Not many readers would know that. Now, harvests obviously are quite difficult to bring in on your own. You need lots of workers, you need lots of hands on deck, as it were. So a hireling is a labourer that you might hire to help you bring a harvest in, so there'll be a temporary member of staff. And this is another dramatic monologue. We've got several of our poems of the decade like that. So To My 9-Year-Old Self, for example. And a dramatic monologue is when you create a character. So the poem is being narrated by the character of a farmer who is a widow, and we know that because he says he's got a late wife. That means his wife has died. And I think it's really, really interesting that the poem starts with this preposition, after. It's unusual to start a poem with a preposition, after the fair. So if you think about what a fair is, obviously because of the time that the poem is set, using that language suggests, it must be set 100, 200, maybe more years ago. The language suggests archaism. But so the type of fair he's talking about wouldn't have bumper cars and roller coasters, but it would have games, and it would have stalls, and it would have things to buy and beer and things like that. So it's a place of great merriment. So he's after the fair, so in a time where happiness has finished. And I wonder if that's linked to the death of his late wife. He says, I'd still a light heart and a heavy purse. Now that on its own is an example of antithesis. So that's when you put together ideas which are contrasting. And the balance of them is what's interesting. He is light-hearted and has a heavy purse. So he's happy because he's made lots of money at the fair. Perhaps he's gone there to sell some animals or something. And the other reason that he's happy about money is because he struck so cheap. So he's talking about the fact that the Lammas Hireling, the man he's hired to help him with his harvest, was cheap to hire. It wasn't an expensive worker. And notice at this point he's still only referring to him by a pronoun. There's an ambiguity about who this man was, this hireling, and in fact we never find out his name. And you could argue there is sibilance here. He struck so cheap. I know it's only two S sounds, but the ch kind of adds to it for me as well, and that creates this sense of unease. There's something strange about this mystery man that he has hired. And then he goes on to tell us a bit more. The cattle doted on him. So to dote is to love in the way that a mother would love a baby. So there's a sense of these gentle animals loving this man. Perhaps he's one of those people that are very good with animals. In his time, mine only dropped heifers. Now, in his time, I think it's really interesting. To me, it sounds almost mythical or biblical. It makes me think of something like Lord of the Rings, like in the time of the orcs or in the time of men. So, in the era of the Lammas Hireling. So it gives him status. It makes the Lammas Hireling sound powerful. He had a time and age all of his own. And in his time, the cows only gave birth to heifers. So notice that the language of the farmer is quite colloquial. That's quite a crude way to describe an animal having young, isn't it, to drop something. And that goes, I think, with the fact that this whole poem is written in iambic tetrameter. which is 4 stress beats per line. And there's also, throughout the poem, a combination of enjambment, where the line runs from one into the other, so like here to here, and then caesura in the middle of the line, like here or here. And that combination of iambic tetrameter and also of enjambment and caesura gives the poem a really narrative quality. It's like, it's pacey, it's like somebody bouncing through a story and wanting to tell you a story. And that goes with the colloquial language where he says things like heifer and dropped. Now a heifer is a word that a farmer would use to describe a female cow. And farmers want female cows, so that adds to the value that this strange young man has. Farmers only want female cows because they provide more money through their milk. And we get a further hint of their value here through this simile, fat as cream. So the farmer is dwelling on the money and the profit he'll get from the heifers when they start to produce milk and cream. And then this really simple sentence, yields doubled. Now, that simple sentence with only 2 words in it, only 3 syllables, to me it suggests that the farmer is quite money orientated. That's what matters to him at this point. And then we've got another caesura. I grew fond of company that knew when to shut up. So first of all, he's telling us that the Lammas Hireling is a listener, not a talker, which gives an air of mystery to him. But also there's a hint here that he's starting to really like this young man. And he tells us a bit more in the second stanza. Now, notice how these 2 stanzas themselves are enjambed. Then one night, disturbed from dreams of my dear late wife. So there's a couple of things going on here. This then one night is reminiscent of a folk song called the Like Wake Song, which used to be sang when people died. And it repeats in the refrain, this one night, this one night. And it's always it's the start of a creepy story often, isn't it? And that enjambs into disturbed from dreams of my dear late wife. So we get that alliteration of the d sound, which again makes me think of death and dullness. But notice that he's being disturbed from dreams. When something disturbs us, we normally say disturbed by something. You know, I was trying to do my work and my little brother, I was disturbed by my little brother. But he's being disturbed from dreams, which implies that he kind of wanted to stay in the dream with his wife. He misses his wife and wanted to stay in a dream with her. I hunted down her torn voice to his pale form. So the word hunted, again, makes the farmer sound desperate and animalistic. He hears from inside his dream her voice and follows it, and when he finds the source of her torn voice, torn is a really interesting use of adjective there because it suggests perhaps she's been torn from life too soon, or perhaps it doesn't sound quite like her, it sounds a bit strained. And when he finds where the voice is coming from, again, we're not told the man's name, he doesn't even say man, he's just described as a pale form. So again, we've got mystery there in the ambiguity of who this man is. Stock still, in the light from the dark lantern, stark naked, but for the foxtrot biting his ankle. So a really shocking image here of when he realises the voice is coming, he finds this young man and he's standing naked and he's got a fox trap on his ankle, and that's also a really unexpected image, which means I knew him a warlock, which is like a male witch and also a shapeshifter. And notice there how, again, it's really enjambed, so that you get this sense on this long sentence of the narrative bouncing along. He really wants to tell you this story. You've got sibilants here, haven't you, as well, which build that sense of unease, and this personification of the fox trap, which adds kind of violence and danger into the poem. It's biting him. So a really shocking image and a shocking realisation that this young man is actually a shapeshifter, a witch, and he is a cow with leather horns. Now that is a direct lift from a medieval riddle, a word puzzle, which indicated a hare, because of the hare's long brown ears and their split lip. So that adds a sense of archaism again to the poem, a suggestion that this is a story from a long time ago. And to go into the hare gets you muckle sorrow. The direct address here is kind of an appeal to the reader, isn't it, for empathy. This could happen to you. You could mistakenly hire a witch. You could choose to become a shapeshifter if you wanted something and it wouldn't do you any good. And this enjambed line gets you muckle sorrow. The wisdom runs muckle care. Now muckle just means a lot, and again it's an archaism. But the enjambment there from stanza to stanza suggests kind of pain which has gone on for a long time. There's longevity to this pain, both for the farmer and for the Lammas Hireling. So what he does is shoots him straight through the heart. I levelled and blew the small hour through his heart. Now these are all colloquial words to describe shooting a quarry. So he shoots him straight through the heart, and the moon comes out, and by its yellow witness he sees the young man turn back into a hare. Now what's interesting about this is he describes the moon as having yellow witness, so he feels this is almost unbelievable what's happened to him, of course. And the fact that the moon is yellow is rather strange. Now you do get that at harvest, it's a harvest moon, but also yellow suggests jaded, and when things are jaded it means they're kind of worn out. It's like the moon has seen this happen many times, and the moon of course is also associated with witchcraft, isn't it, and the supernatural. And he carries him then, and again this is enjambed, I carried him, and you think, oh, maybe he's picked him up and he's going to help him, in a sack. So this enjambment here adds tension, because you realise that he is continuing to mean the young man harm, and drops him from a bridge. And we've still got that combination of caesura and enjambment, which adds to the narrative pace. Now my head's elf shot. So by head he means his cattle. It's another way of saying cattle. An elf shot. So countryside people did, and still do in parts of the world, believe that fairies, pixies, elves will interfere with your crops, your animals, your harvest, if you get on the wrong side of them. So he believes that elves have now shot or ruined his cattle. And notice elf shot, the expression there is inverted, it's an inversion. You normally say shot by elves. Shot, remember, means in this context damaged by, not actually shot with a weapon. So there have been consequences for him of killing the Lammas Hireling. Notice that he says here, that should say there, sorry, that's a misprint, there was no splash. So again, this enjambment to build tension, and there's a sense of fear. If he didn't splash, did he actually go into the water? Is he actually dead? Could he come back? And that carries on here. I don't dream, but spend my nights casting ball from half crowns. Half crowns are made of silver. So he's making bullets from silver, which is meant to ward off evil. You shoot werewolves with silver bullets, for example, to get rid of them. And there's a sense that he doesn't dream anymore. So this has really cost him his relationship with his wife, his dead wife, because he can no longer dream of her. Notice that he grew fond of company for the young man, and that he also describes him as having a lovely head. So there is a subtle hint, I think, that he had very strong, almost romantic feelings for the young man. So maybe this whole idea of him being separated from his wife is somewhat euphemistic for him starting a new relationship with one of his farmhands. I think that's a bit of a stretch, but there's something there to suggest he had feelings for this young man. And he now feels completely separate from his dream world. And he says, "Bless me, Father, I have sinned." Now, This is a surprise because we've got kind of direct address. There's a third character